There we go. We are live. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of State of the City 2020 podcast. I'm your host. My name is Iman Khan, and I'm also a member of the local Global Shapers Hub in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. If you don't know where that is, it's 5 hours north of Montana. Anyhow, we have an amazing guest tonight. She is a very renowned journalist in Canada. She's been involved in the media space for a long time, has traveled, lived, and worked all over the country. So, without further ado, please welcome our guest. She's a journalist and a reporter for Canada's national broadcaster, Miss Kashmala Fida. Yay!
That was quite the intro.
I try. I mean, you're quite the guest, right? So, like, I kind of have to put on a little bit of a show at least, right? How are
Okay,
you feeling
fair.
today?
It's a very loaded question to begin with. I feel okay, considering how everything is going on. I went for a walk yesterday to kind of just like clear my mind, not be on my phone. So, so that was nice. But then goes back to reality today when I went to work. So, it's like there's ups and downs, basically.
Yeah, lows and highs, eaves and troughs, peaks and
Mm-hmm.
valleys, right? But I feel like it might come with the territory, wouldn't you say? So just by the nature of your work, you kind of have to understand different narratives, understand like you get all of this information
Absolutely.
coming in from everywhere, and you have almost kind of like a duty to tell the most accurate narrative possible. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. Because it's literally our job to be on top of what's going on in the world, like not just like in our own communities here in Edmonton, but like the rest of the world itself too. Because usually a lot of stories that we do locally, I mean, obviously, like where I work, our job is to cover like just local stories, right?
Right.
But often those local stories are very much influenced by like what's happening in the rest of the world. Like right now, I mean, as we see here, like we're in the middle of a global pandemic, but also stuff that's happening in the U.S. right now with the protests are also very much being felt here in Edmonton. And then there's a lot of people here who are like participating, supporting. And then for us, because we're on it from the very beginning, it can be a lot, I admit, uh, to be constantly on, to be constantly looking at these things, to be looking at it from all angles, getting all the perspectives, but also constantly trying to, like really get into the story. um I can't complain much because obviously we're not in the middle of it.
Right.
I'm like, we're not experiencing it personally. We're just like, we're reading about it. We're trying to learn about it. But it can definitely sometimes take a toll, just a little bit, for sure.
No, and we will definitely have time to get into that and because we have a lot of ground to cover, and I realize you're a super busy individual as well.
Absolutely.
So I want to begin first with like a little story. A lot of our viewers, you guys actually don't know this, but Kashmala and I met indirectly over the phone one time years ago. Do you remember what that was?
Yes, I was doing a story.
Yeah, so tell our viewers what that was about. It was super embarrassing for me, but oh man.
So I was working on a story about this is when I was originally a city hall reporter, but then I also did like a lot of stories on like diversity and issues and like different cultural like things, So I was working on a story about uh online dating, but like online dating specifically in the Muslim community, because at that time this was like even like people in my own, like my coworkers,
Yeah.
they didn't even know this was a thing, because obviously, dating in our culture, in our religion, it's obviously like kind of, not allowed. But understanding the fact that like we're living in a kind of different era where everybody is super busy, like everybody, like we're working, times are different right now. So to find a partner of your choosing, a lot of people in like the Muslim community are choosing to kind of make the choice for themselves instead of relying on their parents. And how obviously we can go out and have dates, so instead people have these options like dating apps called Minder, which is a play on for Muslim Tinder, I guess. That was the idea, I'm
Yeah.
guessing, Muzmatch. And that's how I found Iman, because he was one of the people I found on these apps. Because I literally, because obviously, how else am I gonna find these people? But literally, just get into it, right? So
Yeah.
I went on these apps and I made a profile for myself, even though I wasn't looking. A lot of people actually did
Yeah,
make
sure.
wrong assumptions. I
Yeah.
actually had a lot of people being like, "So, are you interested though?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Nah, nah, bro, no, I'm not." Thankfully, you weren't one of them. You were very respectful. You actually, and you gave me a very good interview. Um, so I had you and two other people. It was a great story. My editors loved it, and yeah, that's how I got to know you.
It's fascinating because even now, years later, like some of my friends, like I don't know what they're doing. They're going down some deep rabbit hole about Muslim dating apps, right? And then they'll find my name and they'll message me on social media or like call me, like, bro, did you interview about like a minute or so? I still
That's
remember that day because
okay.
I went on a huge rant about it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know you. I didn't even have to ask you questions. It was the easiest interview I'd ever done, because usually I have to like really get a lot of questions in, really like ask for details and stuff. But no, you just went in like one go, gave me everything I needed. And I'm like, you know what? I don't even have any questions, because I got everything I needed just from that one response.
Success.
It was great. No. Plus, I didn't use your photo, so I don't know how everyone can, because I didn't think Iman is a pretty common name, Iman Khan, like your last name too.
Yeah.
But I guess if your
I think
friends
it's
know you,
like there
then
were like a few details that gave it away because there's only like one
oh,
Iman
fair.
Khan in Canada, in all of Canada, who's a guy who has like, I think you mentioned the fact that I was studying engineering at the time. So it's like Iman
Oh,
Khan engineer
maybe.
on LinkedIn. Like it's pretty easy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
put two and two
Fair,
together,
fair,
right?
fair.
But you
Yeah,
know, I've had
that's the
more
other
success since then.
thing. Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. Yeah. I remember. It's, and that's like another aspect of like work too, because like, because I know a lot of people that I interviewed, including you. You were like, I don't want to use my full name, but if we're gonna write a story, in order for it to kind of be more credible, we have to use full names in order
Yeah.
for it to look like these are real people with real experiences, and we're not just like, making stuff up. So that stuff is important, unless it's like a life and death situation or someone is really like, you just cannot get away with it. But yeah, we couldn't use anonymous, hence why I had to use your full name. So
Yeah. You didn't
yeah.
spell my name correctly though. That's one thing that always like,
What?
yeah, you
Why
did. It
didn't you
was
tell me?
because I only realized it like years later. And at that point I'm like, it's already published, whatever. Like
Dude, I'm so embarrassed.
no, it's all good. It's all good.
Actually,
Yeah.
I will send the public editor a note right now and be like, remember that story I wrote? Yeah, I messed up. I'm so sorry. Oh, I feel so bad now.
No, it's
How did
okay.
I
It's
get
all
that
good.
wrong?
I mean, it's like there's so many variations of my name spelling, right? Like a lot of times, like some of my own cousins don't spell my name right, so it's not just you. But like I mean, I did want to also ask you though. Like I mean, we're getting into a bit of the talk about journalism and the media and its role, and about to talk about real issues, things that are affecting people, kind of bring stories to the foreground that a lot of people may not otherwise know about, right? So perhaps you could start a bit earlier on. So let's start from the beginning. Like where are you actually from? Because I feel like you're from the GTA. If I'm not mistaken, you told me like you started off in Toronto and then is that where you grew up?
No, I actually grew up in Pakistan. I'm an
Oh,
immigrant.
okay.
I moved here
Hey,
when
fog
I
life.
was yeah, I know. I actually moved here when I was in grade 12. I moved to Canada in 2008, and we were in GTA for like a month. But then after
Mm.
that, we moved to Nova Scotia, and that's where my parents live. That's where I went
What?
to school. That's where I went to university. I worked there a little bit too. I worked in New Brunswick at CBC over there as well. And then, but yeah, but that's where like I can like in Canada, if I consider home, it's Nova Scotia for me. Yeah, no, 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 not Toronto. Everyone always assumes I'm from Toronto. I don't know why. But no, I'm from Nova Scotia, very Scotian. And then I went to university there, did journalism, did I
And what
freelanced there for a little
inspired you
bit
to?
too.
Sorry, like what inspired you to even pursue journalism? Like, I mean, it's definitely off the beaten track for a lot of like Daisies, especially first
Frank,
generation
oh,
Daisy.
absolutely. I graduated late because my dad was so hell bent on me being a doctor that I like in the middle of my degree, I switched my degree to bio, did that for 2.5 years, and cried to my dad, being like, "I'm sorry, I can't do this. I hate it." Like I was actually like seriously depressed every time I would go to, like, that whole 2 years were like a blur. I don't even remember them because it was just so bad. I hated my life so much, and then I begged them, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna change it. I don't care. And then I changed, but I got very lucky because straight from university I got a job at CBC. So now my dad's like very cool with it. Now he actually brags about the fact that I work for CBC. So it all worked out. But yeah, journalism was something that I had always wanted to get into ever since, believe it or not, as a kid. When I was even in Pakistan, I used to like, I was always into writing. I was always into reading. My cousins used to call me a philosopher, like the joke, because they were like, "You're always reading. You're always like writing something. So it's probably what you're gonna be." Um, and I remember I wrote stuff for, we had this like magazine in Pakistan, like it was like a kids magazine that I remember writing a story too. And the story was about, because I, okay, so my background is Pashtun, I'm Pathan.
Oh yeah, me
And
too.
I lived in,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I think we had
Yeah.
that session too. So
Yeah,
and
we
then
did.
in so and then in Pakistan I lived in Punjab, which is like a province. They speak a different language, different culture, everything. So the kids over there, like the Punjabi kids, would always make fun of me, like my culture, my people. They would always be like, "Oh, you Pathan people." Like there's a lot of these stereotypes back home about our people. They would always talk about those to me. So I wrote about that. I wrote about like my experience as the only Pathan kid in among all these Punjabi kids. And I remember I sent it to these newspapers. I guess it was like an opinion piece. It wasn't so much as journalism, but they sent it back and they said, "Sorry, we can't print this. It's too like depressing. So like write like a happy
Wow.
story about like," yeah, they literally, that's basically what they, I don't remember the exact wording, but they just said it
Yeah.
just wasn't like a happy story, with a happy ending and like happy thoughts. Like they're like, "We're a kids magazine. Everything should be happy." Um, so that was my first failure, and I was very disappointed, and I was super sad. And then I remember my aunt kidding me, joking. She was like, "You should have put some money in there and sent it to them. Maybe they would have published it. You never know." Uh,
I feel like
but
for
yeah,
some of
but
them they
that was
would have
like,
done it. Yeah.
oh, maybe, I don't know.
Ha,
But yeah, that was
express trivia.
um. So that was my. So ever since then, I knew I wanted to do something with writing. So then when when I moved to Canada, I was trying to make up for all the credits, because obviously the credit system in Canada is like completely different than in Pakistan. And then I was also trying to figure out just school and applying to university, because because in Pakistan you usually apply to university after you graduate and you get your grades. But in Canada, you do it like right in grade 12, right? So I didn't
Yeah.
know that. And I'm like, everybody's talking about applying to schools and everything. And I'm like, "Why are you guys talking about this now?" And they're like, "Well, because, you gotta, otherwise you won't get in." And then I remember I looked up the school, the only one journalism school in all of the Maritimes, which, by the way, I asked my parents if I could go to Toronto for J school. And they were like, "What do you think? What? Move out of the crowd? What? No." Yeah, like they literally laughed. Like, they were like, "No, you're not moving away. You're staying close to us." Which I get. We
Yeah.
had just moved to a new country. We were all like, it was scary. So I honestly, in the long run, hindsight, that was a good decision. I loved Halifax. Staying in Halifax, going to school in Halifax was amazing. I used to go home every like weekend or every other weekend. That was also, I needed that. So I'm glad for that decision. And
And where'd you
then
go? Dalhousie? If
I went to, it's called the University of King's College. That's
okay.
where I went to university. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the only like actual
Mhm.
Bachelor of Journalism program that is offered. Um, there's very few journalism schools in all of Canada. There's that one. There's UBC. There's Carleton. And we all basically know each other after we graduate, because Canadian media is so small. That's why, like, I literally know, like, I have journalism friends usually mostly through Twitter, in like Vancouver and Toronto and like Montreal, but like I've never met them. But mostly it's because all of us are working for the same. We all kind of travel over the same basically places, like the same few publications and broadcast corporations and stuff like that. So the media landscape here is really really small compared to, I would say, the States at least. So but it's also nice because you kind of know each other. You have this like big friend group, that half of the people you've never met. um but yeah, anyways, what was I
It
talking
sounds
about?
kind of it sounds kind of analogous to like like a nationwide high school of sorts. Like you have people in their different groups, but everybody kind of sort of knows each other. Do you think that's fair to say? Like
It
everybody is like, oh, I work there and I've rotated through all these cities, or like
yeah.
when you're traveling all
Well,
across
'cause
the country, you meet people, right?
totally. I mean, because the thing is, I feel like the trajectory of most journalists is very similar. We all, I feel like, especially like those of us who have kind of made it to like the more established like media organizations, we all basically rotate between the same places. I know even like my roommate, who's also a journalist, we both worked in Halifax, we both have worked in New Brunswick, like we both worked in St. John at one point, and then we're both here. So we kind of moved that same thing. Like we went to New Brunswick, then went back to Halifax, and now are in Edmonton kind of deal. And I know a lot of other reporters like that who have also done the same. Like, you know, they would move in New Brunswick and maybe go to Vancouver and then end up in. So I think majority of journalists can relate to the fact that they haven't worked in one place for long. They have
Mm.
had to move around for it, for work, because you don't really have a choice, because there's not a lot of
Right.
jobs out there. Like you try to get what you can. It is really tough to get into. You really have to make a name for yourself in order to be able to get the jobs you want. And it's a lot of work. Obviously, you have to work really hard for it. But yeah, it's kind of small. It's a
Maybe
small world here in Canada.
Maybe in that case, would you mind even, because some of our viewers are quite young, like 18 to 25-ish. So would you mind even
Hmm.
like telling people a little bit about what it even means to study journalism in Canada or work in the space? So if I would, if myself or anybody else who's saying about, hey, you know what, I'm a great writer, or I think I was pretty good in my high school TV program reporting gig, right? I think I want to study journalism and become a journalist. What are some of the pros and cons of like studying it, of working in the space? What are like some of the things that you would tell somebody who's, considering this field? Like what are like, some of your thoughts to prospective newcomers to this?
Um, be very open-minded about your work time. um because sometimes you won't have a schedule, and you know what, that's part of life as a journalist.
Oh,
So
wow.
I understand some people, like, you know, are very hell-bent on like getting a degree in journalism, which I mean a lot of us, majority of us have done that. But I actually know a lot of journalists who've done just like diplomas. I know a lot of journalists who did completely different degrees but are now working as journalists. I think at the end of it, it's mostly about your experience and how good you are at the gig. Um, for everyone, if they're studying journalism or if they're like, you know, in a different kind of career path but are considering journalism, my biggest like advice I can give you is just go out there in the field and start working, because
Hmm.
freelance work is there. A lot of companies, when they, because obviously money is tight, as we know in this industry, they will, because if they really need stories, they will hire freelancers. And if you have a really good idea, a publication will not say no to that. So just go out there and like start working, basically. Pitch your news stories to like different publications. A good place to start is usually newspapers, I feel, because my writing especially, I feel like really improved. My reporting as a reporter in general, I feel like I really came into my own while as I worked at for a newspaper.
Hmm.
So start there, but just like start working already, no matter where you are in life, even whether you're in J school, wherever you are. If you really, to get a sense of like how journalism is, just dive right into it. That's honestly the best way you will learn. Because I
So,
feel like even in
uh,
journalism school, sorry,
oh
I
no,
was
no,
gonna say
like, but
even in
please.
journalism school, I was gonna say even in journalism school, like we didn't really actually really get to like learn the craft until like third year university. Like the first 3 years,
Oh,
where I
wow.
remember first year was just like reading newspapers and getting quizzed on that. So, and like, and learning about different, I mean, we did learn about things obviously, about like
Yeah.
different, how to do radio, how to do TV and everything. But I feel like we didn't really actually learn anything until third year, when they were like, okay, so your assignment is go out there, find a story and write it. That's when we learn.
Oh, wow. So
So
I mean, maybe
yeah.
perhaps it would also help if we understood, like, so walk us through the day after you graduated, from that day until today. So walk us through some of these like experiences that you had as a journalist. Did you start off in, if I'm not mistaken, in print media, and then gradually as you kind of develop your stories? Oh no, sorry.
No, no, it's okay. So my journalism, like when I was studying it, that was very much like the whole entire time up until fourth year, all of it was writing. It was creative nonfiction. It was nonfiction, right? Like a feature writing. It was my final, like the final fourth year program, like the thing that we do. Mine was a magazine workshop. But when I was looking for a job, my first job was at CBC with as a
Oh, okay.
broadcast reporter. Even though the only experience I had as a broadcaster was I did one broadcast class, which was like a combined radio and TV broadcast class that I had done. To be fair, though, they didn't want a full-time reporter. They didn't want a contract reporter. They needed someone to cover a 3-week stint at the time. And the only reason I found out about that job was because my professor at the time that I was talking to, and I was like, really need work. I was still actually in school. I hadn't graduated yet. Because I graduated late. I should have graduated in like what was it called? In like I think it was supposed to be fall, but like I was waiting for it because King's only does one graduation. They don't do like fall, and they only do just
Oh,
one
just one
graduation in May.
convocation. Okay.
So yeah, exactly. So if you didn't make it, like you gotta wait. So I was taking these like history classes because I wanted to do like this concentration in history. So I was doing that, and then while I'm in classes, my professor says, "Well, there's because he was friends with the executive director at CBC New Brunswick, and he's like, they need someone for 3 weeks, just 3 weeks. Nobody would apply for it because obviously nobody's gonna take a job that's just like right now. I would never even imagine of doing something like that. But because I was a student and I was desperate, I took it and I was like, yeah, I will do it. I don't care. 3 weeks. It's experience. It's a step in the door. And those 3 weeks later, they came up to me and they said they liked my work, they liked my ideas. Another advice I would give people if they're really into journalism: have a lot of ideas. The more ideas you have, the better. Writing, radio, TV, all that can be taught, but having good original story ideas cannot. If and how to report them and bring them out too, obviously. But I feel like ideas really, 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 really make a good journalist if you have like really original ideas that are different, that are diverse. Um, but yeah, anyways, so that's what they liked about me, was what I was told. So they kept me on for a whole year after that. Yeah, I know
Wow.
it
From
was
three weeks to 52 weeks. That's a huge leap.
yeah, I know it was. Yeah, they kept me full of holy, which was great. But I was a casual for the longest time, and even though I was working full time, which I really appreciate, like I worked full time, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. 3 months in, even the benefits kicked in, so it's not like I was any pressured or anything. But still, when you're a casual, which was the like my position at the time, like a casual reporter, I was always not sure if like the next month I would have a job or if I would have to move somewhere or anything. So I decided to come back to Halifax and then freelance over there. I freelanced with this very social justice grassroots organization. It was like it's called Halifax Media Co-op. The media co-ops are actually across Canada. There's one in Vancouver. There's one in Toronto.
Oh,
I think the
interesting.
Halifax one has
Hmm.
disbanded by now, but yeah, there was one in every kind of major city in Canada. So I worked for the Halifax Media Co-op. They paid decent. But I like the work they did because they would cover stuff that nobody else would cover. A lot of it I wouldn't like having worked news. I wouldn't say a lot of it was like too newsy, but it was definitely related to issues of the time. So I understood why they did it. Um, so that was good experience. And then, but I also needed a full-time proper job. So, and also I felt like I wasn't writing as much as I could have. So I went to the Halifax Metro editor and I told him that I would work for him for free for because I knew he did like the 4-week internship for students. So I told him I would do that with him. And then after that, if he wants to like, hire me as a freelancer to kind of work, he can, but he can just like test me out if he wants to. Um, and that's what he did. He hired me as like an intern basically. And I worked for free for like 3 weeks, I think. And then that's when I found out about the job in Edmonton. And at the time, my only experience with Edmonton was so I had tree planted uh, a couple years before that in Alberta. Like actually, I know this is like a very non-brown thing to do. I don't know a lot of Desis who go tree planting, but yeah, that's something I did for like a whole like a part of the summer here. And my only experience of Edmonton was, so east of Edmonton are these refineries, correct?
Yeah.
It's like a very suburban but also kind of oil refinery. Like there's not a lot of life in that area. I'm just trying to describe it to the people who are listening.
Yeah, it's
um
kind of like it's like the east part of Edmonton, kind of inside the Anthony Henday, but like before it kind of gets to Sherwood Park, which is the
yeah.
nice affluent suburb to the east of the city. So yeah, like I
Oh,
mean most of
we didn't make it to the affluent suburb. We were just at this where the refineries were, and it was kind of, it was like very dead over there. So that was my entire outlook of Edmonton, was that one spot. So when they told me there was a job in Edmonton, I was super depressed because I'm like, that place did not look fun. I do not want to move there. But it was a job. It was a full-time job, and most importantly, it was a job covering City Hall, which I had
mm,
kind of expressed interest to the editor at the time. So I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in covering City Hall. And he's like, well, we already got a reporter. And he's like, don't you dare step on my toes. I'm just kidding. Zaid is a great guy. He's an
yeah.
amazing City Hall reporter. It was a joke.
Just so
Uh,
sorry, just so our viewers get an idea of the picture of what it looks like. If anybody out there watches Peaky Blinders, so Birmingham in England in like the 30s, going through industrialization,
yeah, it's
so
very
smog.
industrial.
Yeah, exactly. Smog, dirtiness, griminess. Like it's very
Hmm.
gritty.
Yeah,
Lots of
it
like
is.
people like wearing overalls covered in muck and stuff. That's like the caricatured
Exactly.
version, but that's more or less what a lot of these refinery sites look like. So imagine that, but
Basically.
in like the 2010s, and like somebody coming out from out east to Edmonton, and it's like, do I really want to work here?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that was exactly. It was very industrial, and I had already lived in a city like that. Like St. John, New Brunswick is a very industrial. Like
Right.
they have their refinery is like right in the middle of the city. So it's, yeah, it was just not a pleasant experience over there. So I was like, you know what? I don't want to go through that. But anyways, it was a job and it was City Hall. So I was like, I'll do it. My original plan of coming to Edmonton was I will come here for a year, work here, and then leave. And you know those T-shirts that say "Still in Edmonton"? Well, I should buy them because nobody rings that true as much as it does for me, because I'm still in Edmonton and I feel like I might be here for a very long time. But
It's funny you mentioned that. Like, there's this one person who's part of our Global Shapers Hub. So her name is
mhm.
Vanessa Lancaster. She's alumni status now, but like she was in charge of our hub for a while. She actually makes these shirts that say Edmonton is pretty okay. They're really cute shirts, right? So I feel like,
I love it.
yeah, I'll send you the link. You
Yeah.
got to check it out. Like, support the cause. Like, she has like some really cute shirts. That's not her job, but like, she makes it for fun. So
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. No, honestly, Edmonton is very underrated. Edmonton is an amazing place to live once you actually get to live here. I feel like from an outsider, if you haven't been here and if you've only been to the refineries like I had, it might sound depressing, but it's actually, I honestly really liked Edmonton. I like living here. I've been living here for 2 years now. So,
So actually,
when
on that
I,
note, like, tell us, like, why did you choose to stay in Edmonton? Like, you kind of came in with one picture and perspective about the city, and like, what kind of made you
mhm,
realize like there's a lot more life here? And I
yeah,
apologize, I realized you were kind of getting into it, but I feel like
yeah.
a lot of
No,
our
no,
viewers would love to hear about it.
totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, so once I came here, I was in Millwoods, so I have like family
Hey,
friends there.
it
Yeah, I know.
was like how
I didn't even know
Casey
that was a
Central.
thing.
Honestly,
So
there's
yeah,
like
so
a
basically,
Oh, I was
yeah.
just gonna say there's this like brown DJ from like this old radio station that's not even live anymore. He came to my high school, J. Percy Page in Millwood, southeast side of the city. Go Panthers. He came in and he was on the stage one day and he's like, "Oh hey, Millwoods, it's the hood," and I was like, "What?"
But
It was
actually,
really big.
okay,
Yeah, but sorry,
okay,
please continue.
interesting. Okay, so I was in Millwoods. So coming from Nova Scotia, which is a bit of a white province, you don't get like, you know how you have so many Indian restaurants here. There's so much food. There's so much culture. Like all of that in Millwoods. Like I had never seen a Sardarji on a bus in my life in Edmonton. I saw five my first day, and I honestly I was like, what where am I? It was like a shock to my system to be around so many Desi people because I was not used to that. I'd come from like even I live in the city in Halifax, but Halifax there's the minority community is really, 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 really low.
Mm.
So it was like a big like I honestly I really enjoyed it because I mean obviously like you crave for that for so long and then when you're finally in it you're like oh my god this is it and then obviously the food the restaurants there's actually restaurants that serve like so many restaurants not just the because in Halifax we had two restaurants we would go to for Desi foods two and we only had one halal option so you
Oh my
know
God.
choices were really limited
Yeah.
but here there's so many options, there's so many places, there's so many stores. We had one Indian store that my parents would drive to from Truro to Halifax in order to get like our halal food, our like the halal meat, and then get like the spices and all that, and like our like parathas and all that.
Yeah,
Here
Shan
you can
masala.
literally get them. Yeah, yeah, shan masala. You yeah, we needed our shan masala, man. You can get shan masala here at Superstore. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that was the number one thing that I was like, this is amazing. Second, my workplace, I used my metro people. I really loved them. They are actually we're all still friends. We are. I think I've worked in a lot of newsrooms around the country, and this is everyone. This is true for every one of us in our newsroom. We have never had the kind of how do I put this? Like we were all not just coworkers, we were all friends but we
Really
were all
though,
were
I feel like a
we
lot of people say that, but like how many people mean it? Like,
one of them is my roommate now
oh wow, okay,
so
that's really
yeah yeah and like we
yeah.
all we have so and we our work had like a Skype group that we used to use to kind of communicate about work stuff and everything. We have kept it going even though the entire newsroom disbanded. We still keep it going, we still keep in touch with each other, we talk to each other. We have we're like actually doing like a Zoom call. Like I'm supposed to plan it but I'm usually the planner of the group. um I'm supposed to plan it at some point in this week or sometime. We were such a good newsroom. We worked so well together, especially because our editor was really good at picking out people that had like really niche strengths. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
So that's why and the thing is like we were because we were all friends. We all really liked each other. Even I've seen in newsrooms, if a person has a story idea, they like to very much keep it to themselves because obviously you want to do the writing, you want to take credit for it. But that wasn't the case in our newsroom. Like if I had a story idea, but I knew that my coworker Hamdi would write it really well, I would
No.
give it to him. In the same way, if there was something that they found out about that they knew that I would do a better job, they would give it to
Mm,
me. So there was a lot of like
interesting.
teamwork happening, which is why I feel like the reason why this is like after we became the Star too, because when we became Star Metro, more people got hired. My current roommate got hired. God bless. We hired like three, four more report. I think it was four more reporters. Correct. Sorry, I have to count this. One, two, three, four. Yeah, we hired four more people.
So it's like about six now.
Yeah, actually, it's seven in total.
I
Sorry,
can
one,
already
two,
tell
three,
like
four,
there's one
five,
of them that you
six,
don't like as much.
seven,
Like
seven. No, I think maybe we did hire because we were three people before.
yeah.
There was me. There was my well. There were three people besides me. Like I was the fourth person. There was my editor, two reporters, and then me. I think I'm counting myself out in this equation. But and then we hired Nadine, Hamdi, uh, Claire, and then Kieran. Yeah, we hired four more people. So yeah, so like all eight of us worked really really well together. I think my math is hella off but it's okay, I'm a journalist, I don't do math. um
It's okay.
but anyways, but yeah, and that's another thing that I really 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 liked about Edmonton was my workspace. I loved going to work. I loved hanging out with my we would hang out at work and then we would all hang out after work too. It was yeah. So that, and then also even like outside of work I have built a very strong group of friends here, that like I feel like a huge network of friends. I have
Mm,
so many friends I can't even count, I swear. So I'm really really thankful for them, and like I always have something to do. There's always something going on in the city. The city is also, I also love the River Valley. I know people are like, ah, the River Valley, it's a very cliched thing to say about Edmonton, uh, outside of the mall,
Hey,
that
I'm not
is.
judging. It's a
But
judgment-free zone.
but the River Valley is amazing. I live downtown now, which is like right next to the River Valley, and I love it here. I love living downtown. I like going for a walk all the way to the River Valley. So all these factors kind of were like a combination, mostly because I built a very strong network of friends here in the city. So I just, that mostly drew me to, you know, liking this place, staying in this place, and wanting to, like, spend more time here.
This brings up a good point though, because I've had like many of us have had conversations with journalists in other geographies and regions and stuff, and a lot of times people in this field sometimes struggle to kind of connect with local communities just because some of those communities may not feel comfortable talking to the media, let alone befriending them or getting to know them on a more personal level. So as someone who
Mm-hmm.
is a part of, the media class, how, and also somebody who came all the way from like Eastern Canada, right? Like how did you like find ways to like integrate within this community? How did you meet friends? Like how do you actually get to know people? Are they just people, is it all purely through work, people you interview, people you work with, or like how do you organically, as someone who's a relative new Edmontonian, like how do you find yourself getting immersed in this community?
Um, so it was okay. It depends on where you are, I guess. Because when I was in New Brunswick, I had a very hard time meeting people. Like even at work, there was one other girl who was my age, because majority of the people who worked there were really older. Like they were like people who had like kids closer to my age kind of deal.
Mm,
But
nice.
yeah, like I'm not that old, but a lot older than I was, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of people were that old. Not gonna lie. And then, but whereas here, like our newsroom were super young. They were all in my age group. Like the entire newsroom was like around my age group. So I had that for me. I actually, when I was very new here, when a newsroom was only 4 people, I actually tried this thing called Bumble BFF, and I met a girl that I knew from Halifax, who
Oh
I had
wow.
known, I had met. Yeah, I know. It was like a super weird connection, because I had met her once through another friend from Halifax, and she was like, because I was like, I know you. I feel like I know your face. And then we kind of started talking, and turns out we had met each other once before at like a friend's birthday, and didn't even realize, like completely had forgotten about it. But she worked for the government, so through her I met a bunch of people. She had also come here from Halifax, was alone, didn't have a lot of friends. So she had tried like Bumble BFF to find friends. And then she met me. She met 2 other girls that she tagged along to. So then I met them. And then through these people, I kind of met more people, and then and then I got invited to this like big event thing where there was like 20 people there. And then I basically became friends with all those 20 people who I still hang out with. And then from there, it kind of grew on. Like whenever I went to more events or more like parties or more like places, or like heritage festival, there'd be like 6 other people that one person would have brought them with them. So it kind of like grew and grew and grew. And on my own too, like through work, actually I've met a lot of people through my work. Like a working city hall, like people who actually like worked there, me and them became kind of friends. Like we would follow each other on social media, then they would invite me to events. I would go to those events, and then that's where they would invite me to then introduce me to more people, and I would meet more people. So that's basically how I've met a lot of the people. And I understand that the whole journalism thing, like my friends who work for the government, the number one thing they love doing is introducing me as, hey, this is my friend Cash, she's a journalist, don't say anything. And like it's a joke, they laugh every single time, and I'm just like, oh, you're so lame. But yeah, but
Hey,
they
it's like I've
love
heard it
doing it.
before. Yeah,
Yeah, they
it's a
love
common thing.
doing it
Yeah.
every single time they introduce me. And honestly, I kind of get it, because every now and then they have let slip like things that I'm like, uh okay, never mind. So I understand why they need to be careful around me. But yeah, but otherwise, I guess it depends on you too, because usually I'm a very social person. I can talk a lot, go on for hours kind of deal. So it's very easy for me to make friends, but I can understand how it can be hard for some people. But I think it really depends on you.
Okay, it sounds like, I mean, like especially for someone coming as like by themselves, especially for work, one of the sentiments that I'm starting to kind of get is that Edmonton kind of went from being like this transient city where people kind of come, maybe fly up north for work or something, then eventually go back home to wherever they're from. But now there are people who are starting to settle down, build their lives, careers, and families, and all that here, right? So, at least like the sentiment that I'm getting is that you can see this place. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 10 years from now, you can see this becoming like an actual long-term home for you, right? Just because like you do have a solid network here, and it is something that you organically develop. Like you didn't necessarily have to rely on existing family connections or something. Like the city, would you say it's fair to say that this city, whether it's like for the purposes of your work when you're interviewing people or just friendships or events, would you say generally the culture of the city is like, it's a little open-ended, like a little inviting? It's not like a standoffish type of culture?
Absolutely. I think Edmonton, like the biggest thing, and I've told this to a lot of people, the biggest reason why I stayed in Edmonton was the community. I've lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia. People obviously are known to be really nice, really caring, and I had a very strong network of friends in Halifax too. But I feel like here, like the support I've gotten, because obviously I've been through a lot in the city. I went through a layoff, then I got a new job, this job that I have right now, and the amount of people that came to me to kind of just be there for me, to help me out, even help me out find jobs, it was like I was really touched. I feel like, and I've had that with a lot of times, like even when like things are happening in the world, people are always checking in on you. Like the kind of people, like everyone you meet is just nice. Do you know what I mean? Like I've never had someone be um like I don't think I've ever met someone who's rude. Like people you think would be rude are not rude. I don't know why. I mean, I'm probably judging some people, and that's like probably bad on my part. Need to maybe do some soul searching there. But yeah, but everybody is just they everybody really. If you're part of the community, they really take care of you. They really make sure that like yes, you are here, and especially if you do have love for Edmonton, if you do want to stay here, people really appreciate that. I know that people who want to work here, like in the job market, like that's something they look for is like, a sense of community, that like if you are living here, you definitely want to like belong to this place and like call this place home. So I really like the whole community aspect of Edmonton. It's very strong. It's very welcoming. You do not feel, like I said, Edmonton is. I always say Edmonton is for people because everyone knows everyone, and that's because everyone is actively trying to kind of like get to know you, get to know each other. Even if you didn't go to university here, I know there's a lot of connections that are usually made because of U of A.
Oh
If
yeah.
you go to U of A, there's like everyone knows everyone kind of deal. But I didn't go to U of A, and there's still so many people that I meet that if I meet a whole different set of people from the other side of town, even there would be a connection somewhere. So I really like that about Edmonton.
Yeah, in a city like this, I mean, there's only what, like 940,000 people. It is, if
Yeah,
you're, especially if you're kind of involved in like the mainstream social scene and activities and uh, like, certain key events, and like the social calendar is only so big, right? There are
yeah.
always like cool, niche, nifty, interesting things happening. So it's good to stay involved. There's actually, it makes me wonder though, like, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that because you're not like other people in the sense that like many people, their families came here for economic opportunities and all kinds of things like that, but in your case you also kind of hold a very notable position within our civic society, right? So as someone who's not only a journalist but I guess almost kind of like an ambassador to many minority communities, especially like the burgeoning South Asian community in Canada, but also in like Western Canada in particular, do you feel a sense of responsibility as as not only a representative of the media but also as a member of the media who is also first generation Canadian, who's also a visible minority? Do you feel some sense of duty and purpose to show like different perspectives that may have historically been covered up and stuff? And if so, like we'd love to hear a bit about that.
Abs- I try to, obviously. It's something that I definitely feel very passionately about. It's one of the reasons why I whenever I pitch stories, I try to make sure that there is some kind of representation from our community, or not even from our community, but like from minority communities in general. At CBC, or not even just CBC, but like at the Star, like usually any work I do, I try to do a lot of stories from like the communities to kind of show different sides to it. I know I've done a lot of stories from, because I know when stories are written from our communities, they're usually written about the same things over and over and over. When Ramadan is happening, it's happening every year. It's the month that Muslims fast. We know it's the month that Muslims fast. I think a lot of people now know this. But there's like a lot of stories that can happen within those times, you know. So I try
Yeah.
to do more of those that are like a little bit different, like a little bit more to the community that's there. For example, in Edmonton, I did a story on how um, like fasting in Edmonton is actually the hardest thing ever, because compared to, like, for example, out east, because days are so much longer here. When I tell my mom, they're like, how are you surviving, you know? So that was a very like niche story that is very Edmonton specific, but Edmonton specific to the community that I did, that I was like pretty happy with, because obviously nobody knew about it. It was something completely new, and then people here, like the minority people here, could relate.
Mhm.
um as for I also, another thing that I prefer to do with my work, not just as a reporter but also as someone who's a public figure, is not only like make our image nice in front of, you know, like the rest of the world, but also hold our community to account.
Right.
um because the thing is, like, it's no secret that our community has a lot of issues. There are a lot of problems. There are a lot of things that we need to work with as like South Asians. In today's world, like especially with like the Black Lives Matter movement, I know like our community has so much work to do. I know a lot of people in our community, because the thing is, like, our experiences are not the same as theirs, right?
Oh, of
Like
course.
we
Yeah.
have it so much better than them, but I feel like especially like our older generation a little bit, they don't have a lot of knowledge about that. And even I know even a lot of young people, they don't know. I know a lot of South Asian people
Sorry,
who are like very comfortable.
sorry,
Sorry.
I should clarify for our viewers. Right now, like it is like it's June 2020. Recently, about a week ago, if I'm not mistaken, a Mr. George Floyd, who is an African American male, a black man, he pretty much got murdered on camera when a police officer pressed his knee against his neck for 9 minutes. He said, "I can't breathe," and then unfortunately, because of that incident, he passed away, and that has sparked a number of protests and all across the not only Minneapolis and Minnesota but all across the US and even far-flung places like Toronto, London, Berlin, you name it. It has turned into a global phenomenon. So this conversation regarding like culture and race and class in like a Canadian context, it's happening kind of within this wider conversation. And Kashmala, like, please continue. But like, in addition to what you were saying, we'd also love to hear about your thoughts on like kind of like the media's role in portraying, especially very sensitive issues with COVID-19. In the beginning, when it came out, there was a lot of mass hysteria and panic, and people not really sure, what information to trust. We know there were some public personalities from politics, from like certain segments of the media, not necessarily in Canada, but there were well-known individuals on social media who were kind of almost kind of agitating and like kind of causing a bit more problems than others. And now COVID times the multiplier effect of mass protests surrounding racial injustice, it really kind of brings this idea of like the media's responsibility to the forefront, right? So in addition to what you were saying, we'd also love to hear about that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm very much on the point
Oh,
of the fact that, like, the thing is, when it comes to covering the pandemic, I feel like like calling it a mass hysteria is a little, I don't know if I agree with it personally, considering that
yeah.
I've been on this from the very beginning, right? um when and I've been, well, as reporters, obviously we were keeping track of it when it was happening in Wuhan. We were keeping track of it when Italy was on lockdown. We actually, at as a reporter, I actually talked to people in Italy, like Edmontonians who were in Italy at the time, and I had a phone interview with them. So we've been covering the story from like all angles, from way before it even got to us. So we knew it was a pretty big story, because our health officials were telling us so. It wasn't that the media created this. It's what we were just, our job. I feel like a lot of people get confused. It's not what the information that we put out there as journalists, as reporters, as unbiased media. um, this is not taking into I'm not taking into facts the opinion pieces. I'm not taking into consideration columns that are written. No, this is just reporting news and just news. Our job literally is to look at what's happening in the world, state those facts, and then give them to you. You know, if health officials are telling us that this thing is happening, it's really bad, it's super contagious, and now look at all these numbers of like how many people have it, that's what we're going to tell you. If you're going to go crazy and like raid the superstore for toilet paper, that's on you. We didn't tell you to do that. We just told you about a new disease that was, you know, like kind of sweeping up the world, and we just told you that to be careful, to just wash your hands. That's what the media said, because that's what the media just reported on what the health officials told us. Our job is literally to kind of, you know, like tell you guys, because obviously health officials have a lot of information to give out. The public can't sit there and absorb all of it. Our job is to simplify it, give it to you in like straight facts so that you can learn about what's going on and what they're telling us, right? That's literally our job. Our job isn't to say like, oh no, we're all gonna die. Our job is to say that, hey, these many people have this virus. These are the numbers. This is how quickly it's accelerating. This expert is saying this is scary and this is bad. We didn't say it was, you know, like I feel like a lot of the hysteria that was created, that was very much created by people itself. And then we did write about it. We did write about the fact that like people were hysterically buying toilet paper because that's what people were doing. We didn't tell people to do that. So I feel like there's always this like, I know I'm speaking as the media, but I feel like there's always this like absolute blame put on all media. And I'm not saying there weren't conflicting reports. I'm not saying people didn't go all crazy. There was a lot of information that was put out there that was kind of questionable. But you always like, but people I feel like need to be a little bit more cognizant of like to look at where that news is coming from. A, whether even that is news. B, whether is that an opinion, a column piece that you're reading, because a lot of times people will read opinion and column pieces and then being like, what has reporting come to, what has the media come to? And it's like, that's not journalism. That's literally an opinion piece written by someone, you know, and it is that one person's opinion.
And it brings up an interesting conversation regarding not only like, I know I said the media's role like 7 different times, but but also the media's responsibility and duties not only to society but also to themselves and their organizations to report the truth. Recently, as some of our viewers may be aware of, so there was a CNN reporter, Omar Jimenez, if I'm not mistaken. So he was out with a crew interviewing individuals at a protest surrounding the George Floyd murder while he was in the custody of the Minneapolis police. And he was arrested live on camera, something that people would have never fathomed in a million years. Only like, you know, 6 years ago, you would have no one would have imagined things like this happening in a very affluent first world country like the United States. So I want to ask you, Kashmala, do you feel like, especially right now in the very polarized climate, which is unfortunately amplifying a lot of questionable voices through certain social media platforms, and people who in the past may have been relegated to the fringes, now anybody can say anything and get away with it. In fact, we even heard recently about certain social media giants saying that they're not going to verify claims by people who hold a lot of public sway. They're not going to verify. They'll let anybody hypothetically post anything they want. Do you feel that to a good extent, unfortunately, the media and the representatives of the media, such as yourself, in the public limelight, do you often feel like you're almost under attack? And if so, what can the society do to better support a free and open media?
I wouldn't say we're under attack per se. I know my only problem with the public's perception of the media is how it's all lumped in together. Because when people say, I honestly personally, I know you used it a few times, but I don't like the term media because media is so many things. No. This is I'm just saying when people mean it in like a negatory way, and then they say media, like media is literally everything out there. Like social media is media, like newspapers, broadcast, even the PR team, though they're media. So like what media is movies, like what media are you talking about when you say the media is bad? um so i I know, again, it depends on who you are, who you're working for some it's a lot worse than others. um I personally have never felt attacked by anyone unless someone actually did say something to me online. I know there is a lot of distrust of media, which I think is because of there's just the thing is there's a lot of knowledge out there, and a lot of times people don't know where it's coming from. So when they don't know, they kind of believe that it's all the reporters that are sending this out there, even though it's not. There's also a lot of these like fringe newspaper, like online publications out there that post a lot of fake news, and people always believe that because they're putting it out there it's the same thing as us, even though it's not. When we say only look for reputable uh, organizations, we mean CBC, CNN, like CTV, you know, the Star, Globe and Mail, Canadian examples. But when people are looking at like planet.org published this news story about how, I don't know, the 5G is causing the coronavirus, and then like
Oh
all the
my God.
aunties are posting it, and then all these old, I know I kind of blame the older generation for posting a lot of misinformation out there, but it's true, it is. There was a study, they proved it. But I mean, it's not just them, honestly. I've seen a lot of younger people post these too, but there's like a lot of misinformation that people very openly, without fact checking, post it, and then when it's wrong, or if it becomes like a really big bad thing, they blame it on us, even though our job is literally to put the news out there, to put it out there as truthfully as we can. What you do with it is, I don't want to say on you, but what you do with all the information that you're getting is kind
Yeah.
of on you, you
And I
know?
can
Um,
one thing I'll just
Sorry.
tell our viewers, in case there are any doubts, 5G cell phone towers, they do not cause coronavirus. I know
They
because I
do
used to
not.
climb cell phone towers all across Canada. Shout out to my former
Yeah.
employer, Varcon Inc. I love you guys. Thanks for giving me my first engineering job.
Yeah.
Uh, Guaranteed, it does not cause coronavirus. I don't have it. None of my coworkers got it. So you're in the clear with regards to that. But
Yeah,
Kashmala,
I
like,
know.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, there
Yeah.
is a lot of, like, people don't really differentiate sometimes between, because I've seen, even, I saw earlier a doctor from Calgary post this news story about the people who the people who were responsible for the death of George Floyd, like, who's like, one of them was African American, one of them was black, and I was like, no, he wasn't. There was two white guys, and like, yes, there was, and there was a picture of a random black dude in there, and I'm like,
Okay.
where did you find this picture? Did you Google all the four people in that story? And he's like, no. And I'm like, then why would you share this if you didn't see it? And then when stuff like that happens and all this misinformation is shared, and then if something bad happens because of it, because it always does, bad stuff happens when you put out wrong information out there, they then blame us, like the regular media who are actually
Right.
doing their job to actually fact check, do all the work.
So, like as some of our viewers might have heard of, there are certain online resources that can allow you to verify viral articles and stuff like that. Like there's Snopes and like a few SNOPES. Google it. By the way, they're not sponsoring this, so that's not me shouting them out. Kashmala, I mean, you brought up a really amazing point, which is that a lot of people, particularly the elderly, people who are not as tech savvy, people who may not have strong command of certain languages like English, where surprise the
Mhm.
whole world's websites, like everything, a lot of this content is written in English.
The technical,
How do
yeah.
we? What are like some of the resources that you're aware of, where our viewers and other people out there can check out so that they can, I guess, become more literate uh, and better at interpreting content when they come across it?
Um, okay, I understand, because obviously there's a gap when it comes to like language, where it comes to, so I know, because majority of the people who are like I know on WhatsApp and things, a lot of our aunties, so when it's in
Oh yeah.
Urdu and if it's in like a different language, it's a little hard to kind of police that. But I'm talking about specifically like on Facebook. Um, just honestly, you don't even need a lot of resources. Just Google, if you Google a headline story that you saw on Facebook or something, if you literally Google it, it will come up if something is fake or not. Because that's literally what I do. Sometimes I'm
Mm,
not sure if what people are putting out there is true or not. Because obviously I'm not like, yes, I work in the news business, but obviously I wouldn't call myself an authority on everything news. Sometimes I'm not sure what people are putting out there. So I always do a quick Google search to see, I look up the names, whatever information they're posting out there. Quick Google search takes 2 minutes, not even, and it will show up like, oh, this conspiracy is currently floating, or this is fake news. The
mm,
first few articles will come up like that. It happens quite a few times. I remember there was a story, it was posted on one of those Yellow West sites where they posted about how in France these guys wanted the nude beaches to or like they wanted to like cancel all women going to beaches or something like that. And they're like, yeah, these Muslims can't control our lives, these Muslims can't control our women, they shouldn't tell us to do something like that. We don't care if it's Ramadan, uh, we have a right to go to our beaches and stuff like that. So I looked up that news, I literally just Googled the headline for that story, and the first story that came up, that fake news photo was traveling around of like a campaign like that did happen. These two kids wanted this beach to kind of close during Ramadan, but it wasn't in France, it was in like a Muslim country, like a Muslim majority country where they're all Muslims. And these two guys were like, you know what, it's Ramadan, maybe we shouldn't go to the beach. Which over there, and even in that country, I think the government was like, no, people have a right
yeah.
to go wherever the hell they want.
Yeah.
So they took that image of those two guys being like, no beach, no, or I think it was just like no beaches, no going to beaches, and like they put the name of France
Yeah.
on it, and they were like, in
Yeah.
France they're trying to do, or was it Australia, I forget. Yeah, so and now that's like making people hate like the Muslim community more, because they're coming for our beaches, and that's not even true. It was a completely false story. Quick Google search for those who, if you're savvy enough to like read a whole article and then post it on Facebook, I think you can do a quick Google search. I
But that's
understand there are
yeah.
obviously limits. I know, like my own mom, she struggles a little bit, like when it comes to like
Mm.
English language. I sent her a couple articles yesterday, and they're like, "These are so long. How will I read this?" And I was like, "Fair." Um, I honestly don't have an answer for that, but I am very much willing to maybe look into it and learn and find out, because I completely agree. There is definitely like we definitely need to fix it, because the reason why it's getting so bad, I mean, we keep talking about it, and I just realized we actually just keep talking about it and never have actually found a solution for this, but we definitely need to. um because the other thing is, we can't even like get too mad at them either, because for example, when the corona pandemic was happening, you would have moms sending you things like, if you eat this, it won't affect you. And I know I was speaking to, and I was trying to do a story on this, and I know like a bunch of people said like, this is the mom's way of trying to do her part to kind of help you out. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like
That
she
doesn't
can't
really
do
help, right?
anything else.
Yeah.
It doesn't help, but like in her heart, she's like, oh,
Yeah.
I saw this thing, this must work, I must send it to my daughter, because what if it does, kind of
Yeah.
deal. So from their part, it's coming from a good place, but obviously the information itself is not correct, so it's not helpful. Plus, it can be dangerous. But like, you can't fault the moms or the aunties first, because what they think, they're actually sharing this because they're doing a good thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like there either needs to be like a very like internal, like maybe we need to just take on the WhatsApp and like start a campaign being like, everything you read is not true.
Mm.
Maybe don't trust only trust if it has this news site on it, otherwise don't trust the story at all. Because literally, because what the reputable news organizations that we have in North America in general are very few, right? There are names that can be written on one doc and just sent out there. It's not like we have so
But I
many that
think
like you're going to lose count.
when
Yeah.
when you kind of like pivot the conversation towards like only following what we believe are reputable media, two categories of detractors will start coming to the forefront. One category will say an argument along the lines of, oh well, but like, who are you as the member of an established media channel to
That's fair.
like say that, oh, like our media channels are invalid, right? And then the other version of that will come to the forefront are people who are say, well, okay, well, you know, you're an immigrant, you're probably a liberal, so you liberal media channels are trying to shut down our conservative channels. And then, I mean, arguably there could even be a third angle. Like I've heard versions of like, they're not strong arguments, but I heard a third variant of this where someone's like, oh, it's my liberty as a citizen of this country to have freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of assembly and all of these like personal liberties that will be oppressed if only certain allegedly corporate led and finance allegedly
Yeah.
organizations are the only ones allowed to tell us what to believe, right? So there's also this
Yeah.
tendency for a lot of people to use like variations of these three arguments to try shutting that conversation down. So
I feel like people always and like I get that, like when you say you're from one organization, people always associate you with that one organization. And because I've had this conversation with like uncles in the community where they're like, when I used to work for the Star, they said, so how much are you allowed to write on your own and how much is the Star telling you to write? And I was like, what does
interesting.
that mean?
Yeah.
And to them it was, the idea was that like I they believe that we don't have any freedom to write about, like, 'cause our literal job is to just write straight facts. They believe that if those facts don't match the narrative of whatever our organization is, it'll be cut out.
Hmm.
That is not true. On editorial level, everything we do stays on the editorial level. What our bosses, corporate bosses, they do not dictate what we write. The stories that I write, I pitch them myself. Okay. I pitch them. I talk to the right. I do, obviously, you have, every time you pitch a story, you have to do all your research. You have to talk to all the
Yeah.
people and be like, hey, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to talk to this person. This is how the story. This is what the story is about. But yeah, but people always believe that like the Toronto Star, because it's a Toronto Star and it's a liberal thing, they're telling me to write what to write. But
Hmm.
that's not
Do you think it
true.
might also
I
be
am
though
my own person.
yeah. Do you think
Like,
it might also be though like the reality that and it's not against any particular channel or media outlet or news magazine, newspaper or anything. Do you think there's also, because I can kind of see their argument a little bit in that there could be, you know, certain whether it's due to a cultural thing or whether it's just certain preferences, you know, personal interests by editorial boards on certain subjects. Do you think there is some level of argument that someone could make about the realities that, you know, just by virtue of being humans, sometimes there could be preferences to shine a certain light on a subject from like a particular angle, or maybe cover certain subjects in more depth than others. And like I know, for instance, like one of the arguments, especially in light of what unfortunately happened to Mr. George Floyd, a lot of the conversation surrounding especially news media, surrounds the idea that when certain demographics, African Americans, Latinos, and in Canada, like the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, when they conduct protests, the terminology used to refer to them is like riots and things like that. But then at the same time, when you know, the old stock Canadians have like their versions of protests, right? It's like, oh, you know, it's a oopsie daisy type of thing. So
yeah,
a few people
no,
have kind of brought these contracts to light. So like, what are your thoughts on that?
bias in media exists. I am not denying that. It definitely exists, but it's something that like I know every organization, not just bias, but even like racial inequality, like talking about stuff when it comes to race. All that's like a lot of issues exist in our in journalism. I'm not in Canadian journalism. I'm not denying those. They definitely exist. But are they working towards it? Yes. There's also work happening. There's still a lot more work to be done, like so much work, because our media is still very white dominated. Our media is still like, we don't like when I tell you that like I know majority of the journalists and I know we're friends, majority of those are like brown journalists, and there's so
Oh,
few of us, like
yeah.
so few of us. Like I mean, on the larger scale, yes, a lot of us journalists know each other, like majority of them, but then there's like a smaller bubble within that bubble, which is like brown journalists, and there's so few of us. Like all of us are actually like, we're not just Twitter friends, like, you know, Twitter, like we interact with each other on Twitter. Like I have reporters from
Huh.
Vancouver that like I talk to and are friends with, but the brown journalism family is so small that we all like cling to each other so hard. Or like even like the black and brown, I wouldn't just say just brown, but yeah, we cling to each other so hard because we, like the four of us, like it's all
Has
we
to be more.
have, you know. There's probably more.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of throwing a number out there, but like it's very few. It's very few. There's very few of us, and like we definitely need it, because sometimes when we're covering stories, sometimes the backlash that sometimes we get on those stories, um, it can be a lot, and like you can only discuss it with another person who gets it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
of
and
course.
sometimes that person isn't in our newsroom. That person is in a different newsroom in Toronto, and all you can do is send them a DM on Twitter and be like, "Hey, dude, had the worst day. Can we talk?" You know. So, and that happens. We've had those conversations with each other where it's like sometimes our stories are really tough. So I'm not saying that like sometimes the media, like sometimes I just said media, sometimes like we treat things a certain way. Yes, mistakes happen, they have happened. um, Pains me to say that they might continue to happen, but it's not to say that work isn't being done, because a lot of people are calling us out on it too, right? Like we, even us ourselves, like we're having a lot of conversations with our superiors to be like, hey, how can things change, how can we do better, how can you do better? And I know those conversations, I feel like are taking place across the board. Sometimes they do a good job of portraying things, sometimes they mess up so badly that the rest of us are watching like, what the hell, you know. um
So I guess,
yeah, so it's a
yeah.
lot of work. It Yeah,
So I guess
sorry.
Kashmala, I guess like one more, like the last thing, like I wanna like just like kind of hear your thoughts on, at least for tonight. um, what do you think is the future of media, not only in Canada but in like a wider sense? Because we do like, so some of you guys might know this or not, but like I once for a youth program I interviewed Miss Elise Stolt, who is a local journalist, and
I love
during that,
her.
yeah, she's amazing. Yeah. I think she's in Switzerland or somewhere right now. So I hope
Yes,
she's safe.
yes.
Yeah. Great lady. So one of the things that she mentioned is that she got one of her first starts in a very, very, very rural newspaper, like smack dab, if I'm not mistaken, in the middle of nowhere. I think it was somewhere in Saskatchewan, but I could be wrong about that. So this idea that we went from a generation or a time, 2, 3 decades ago, where there were lots of local print, uh, like local newspapers and things like that, and multiple local broadcasters, to now suddenly a lot of like the power within the media and the number of channels, like it's all kind of amalgamated, it's all kind of centralized. So considering the fact that through the access to internet and also social media, people can make their own Facebook page and call themselves a journalist even if they don't necessarily have qualifications or any real way of saying that, right?
Yeah,
What do you
yeah.
think is the future of the news media industry as a whole? Do you feel like more and more of it will increasingly go online? Do you feel like a lot of like the print media will continue to kind of wither until a day might come where there aren't print newspapers anymore, it's all online?
Yeah,
Or what do you think the future is for the industry as a whole?
yeah. I feel like and I'll get to the future part. I feel like right now we're at a very weird place where there's a lot of talent. There's like, like journalists are doing really, really good work. Like I like a lot of journalists I know, not just in Edmonton, but like across the board in Canada, like they're doing really amazing work. We have the resources to do it. We're telling, I mean, obviously there's more stories we can tell, there's more angles we can cover, but a lot of journalists are doing a very good job of kind of telling those stories. The only thing we haven't what the only thing news organizations, I'd say, haven't figured out is the business model. Because that's the reason why journalism isn't dying, because the industry itself is kind of like is not doing a good job. We're still the news we put out, the investigations that have been happening, like if you like, the work done is really good. It's just nobody wants to pay for it. So
It's kind of
because
sad.
people don't realize that journalism is a service. Like this is the work we do. We provide a service by bringing your news to you. um, and we would like to be paid for it. Like we would like to eat food, so i I feel like the the thing that like a lot of organizations struggle with, the reason why a lot, like obviously Star Metro closed, the reason why that happened was because we haven't really figured out a very like a strong business model that works for companies. I feel like this is more like a corporate issue than it is like on the journalism level issue. I mean, we have our own things to deal with, so I won't get there, but when talking about like how journalism is dying and everything, it's because of the business angle basically. I know things are moving online, and places like, I know some publications, like they're really reaching out to the community aspect of it, like they're they're making people aware of the fact that, like, yes, we're doing this as a service to you. So that's working for some people, like that's working for Sprawl in Calgary. Canada Land really uses that, like they really have, like, you know, like they even have like interactions with the public themselves, being like, you're paying me to do this. They even acknowledge the people who like subscribe to them basically, so they have that connection built with their like readers and listeners. So I
So,
feel like some people have it down, sorry, but it's still like a struggle that we're all trying to figure
right.
out basically.
You heard it here first, folks. Or probably not first. We're probably like the 50th person who's in, or organization who has interviewed you. So, guys, just want to give a huge round of virtual applause to Ms. Kashmala Fida. Thank you so much for giving us your time, your energy, your efforts, and also your insights on our society as it is, the future of the space, and how, if you don't mind us asking, if someone it does have a story that they're really interested in sharing with a wider audience, or if they just want to get in touch with you, how can, like, some of our viewers or anybody else listening in or watching, how can they get in touch with you? No, you still there? No.
Well, Twitter's the best way.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Still here. Hi. It
Oh,
cut off
hey,
for a
yeah.
second.
It just kind of like, I don't know what happened, but sorry. What's the best way people can
Oh, okay, okay,
find
okay.
the illustrious Miss Kashmala Fida?
So I have my contact on if you look up my name on Facebook or even Twitter. I'm definitely always open to, you know, like answering any questions people have, for sure. You can send me a DM, send me a message on Facebook, or I have my email, my work email listed. If you feel free to email me as well if you have anything that you would like covered out there that you think, you know, like we're not doing a good job of covering. Definitely send me that too. We're always down. But yeah, the best way.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, Ms. Kashmala Fida, she is a journalist and reporter at CBC Edmonton. You can find her on all major social media channels. She's always in and around town, interviewing a lot of cool people, writing about fascinating topics that many of us, unfortunately don't hear enough about, right? So if you guys want to get in touch, please, like, don't hesitate to reach out to her. And Kashmala, thank you so much. And I guess, like, the last thing I want to ask you, because you did kind of give an answer for this earlier on, but like I still want to, we always ask this to all of our guests. You told us the River Valley and Desi restaurants, but tell us, what's your second favorite place in Edmonton? And like, tell us about a niche restaurant or somewhere you like eating that, maybe doesn't get
Palm,
enough limelight. What?
Palm. One of my friends told me about Palm. It's a Persian restaurant. It's like tiny in on somewhere. It's on White Avenue. You'd have to look up exactly where it is, but it's super small. And oh my God, is it? It's Persian food, and it's the best Persian food I've ever had in my entire. I could eat it all day, to be honest. It's the best. It's super small. I don't think a lot of people know about it. I know, like, foodies here in Edmonton. When I tell them about it, they don't know about it.
Oh,
But
wow.
Palm, check it out. POM.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Thanks so much, Kashmala. Don't be a stranger, and like, thank you once again for coming out, like, onto this, like, virtual interview. We really appreciate it, and yeah, like, I wish you and all of our viewers a great night. Okay, this was episode 3 of Global Shapers Edmonton's State of the City 2020 podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy your week. Bye, everyone. Peace.